Call to order this meeting of the Bloomington Plan Commission for October 12th, 2020. Virtual meeting here, so beg your patience as we navigate this through technology. I know we also have some storms going on right now, so I think there's a strong chance we'll have some hiccups here tonight, and you may hear some background noise with raindrops pounding on the roof here, so I apologize for that. But we'll get started with the meeting here. Let's start by calling the roll.
Burrell.
Did you say my name?
Yes.
Yes.
Kate. Cochran.
Yes.
Herrera.
He has his hand up. He may not be able to speak.
Oh, thank you.
Kinsey.
Yes, here.
Copper.
Here.
Sandberg.
Here.
St. John.
Here.
Whistler.
Here.
And Wright Randolph.
Here.
All right. Looks like we do have a quorum, so we will continue. Let me just start by just giving a brief overview of the agenda here. We have three petitions to be considered tonight. One petition that has been continued to the November meeting, and we'll have a little bit of housekeeping before we get to those petitions tonight. But the three are the Standard at Bloomington LLC on 301 East Brownstone Drive, and then Comcast at 1600 Fountain Drive, followed by 616 South College Mall Road LLC, and that is site at 2670 East 2nd Street. So we will get to those three petitions shortly, but prior to that, we do have a little bit of housekeeping. The first item is that we have some minutes to be approved. We have minutes from the September meeting, and I would entertain at this time any corrections or additions to those minutes, or a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve the September 14th minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any corrections or additions? Okay, then all in favor of approving the September minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay? Okay, those minutes are approved. Next, we have some reports, resolutions, and communications. We'll start with any reports or communications from staff. And I'm guessing by the presence of the mayor here, I think we probably do have a report or a communication coming from staff.
Yes, so the mayor is joining us here tonight, I believe, to discuss the resolution that we have on the agenda. So we will go ahead and throw that to him. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you so much. It is really good to see you all. Thank all of you Plan Commission members for all your great service to the community. I don't come in front of you too often, but I know how hard you work and appreciate all your work for the community. I did want to show up tonight and make sure I get this right. This is the resolution to approve the new director of the Planning and Transportation Department, right? Is that I don't want to speak on a resolution that I'm not supposed to be speaking on. So you have that resolution
Yes,
in front
that's
of you, right?
correct. Yes.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to come personally. We, as you know, Terry Porter retired, and I haven't even called her in the last 2 weeks to see how she's doing, but I think she's doing well after her great service to us. And as you probably know, we did a national search, reached out to encourage folks to apply to become the new director of the Planning and Transportation Department. We received a number of applications. I think there were 4 finalists, which included 1 internal candidate and 3 external candidates with extensive reviews of all of that. I'm here to strongly endorse and encourage your support, which is under Indiana state law, I believe, required to approve the appointment of Scott Robinson as the new director of the Department of Planning and Transportation. He is no stranger to you, I know, and I hope, like me, you find Scott's professionalism, his expertise. He's been with the city for 18 years. He's a certified planner in the American Institute of Certified Planning. He has spent more than 20 years in the field and is intimately aware and connected to so much of Bloomington's planning infrastructure, from the comprehensive plan to the Unified Development Ordinance to transportation plan and so many other things. And Scott has been a terrific ally and asset to the community and to this department. He did a great job in the interview process and was the selection of all. And we're very pleased to ask you, and I personally want to ask you to endorse him as the next director of the Planning and Transportation Department. He has terrific colleagues who help him do well, and I know that will continue. You are familiar with many of them too, but I think it's a terrific fit and encourage you to support him. And I just wanted to be here personally. Scott, congratulations on your role and your history and your record, and congratulations. And we're really excited, pending the review and approval of the Plan Commission, to you taking on officially this role. So that's all I wanted to do, be here tonight. Thank you, Scott. Thank you all for what you do. I'll leave it now as the sausage is made. I'm going to go away. I don't want to see all this stuff. So, all right. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there anyone else from staff, anything to add to the mayor's comments here, or should we move on to?
No, so we'll just go ahead, I think, and do the resolution. And then if Scott has something to say, I think typically it would be after. So we do need a vote on the resolution, which was in your packet, RS 2620, which is the standard resolution for appointing a new director.
Mr. Chair,
Right.
I would move RS-26-20, the resolution for Scott Robinson as the director.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve RS 2620 in a second. Any comments or questions or discussion from commissioners before we vote on that resolution?
Just that it only seems fitting that, given Scott's extensive involvement in the comp plan and the UDO, that he would now have to live with us as we implement it. So seems very fitting. Thank you, Scott.
Yes, I concur. And just, yeah, good. I'll just say that I know no decision on hiring for a position of this weight is easy. But having said that, Scott really does seem like the easy choice here, and the obvious choice, and well qualified and well deserved choice. So I'm going to be happy to support this. Any other comments or questions before we call the roll? All right, please call the roll. The motion is to approve RS 2620.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Kate, Sandberg. Oh, gotcha. I'm sorry about that. St. John.
Can I vote twice?
Maybe so. St. John,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Herrera,
I say yes before, so
Oh.
if I'm
sorry, my
okay.
ears a little jumbled. Copper,
Yes.
got everything?
Okay. So that resolution is approved. Thank you, to the Mayor, and to Scott. And Scott, welcome. and good luck. Looking forward to working with you.
Well, appreciate everybody working with you over the years, and look forward to continue to work with you all. And I have a great support team that I'm going to rely very heavily on. But again, I really appreciate the opportunity to continue to work with you, and I look forward to many things in the future. And again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. So let you get on to tonight's business, but thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any additional reports, resolutions, or communications from staff?
The only other item we wanted to point out was because of Scott's job change, we will need a new hearing officer alternate. We will bring you that next month. We are in discussions. Code requires that it be a staff person. And so we are close to identifying one who is interested in doing it, but we were hoping to have it done by tonight, but we will get it to you next month. And that's the only appointment that we currently need from you right now. So just a heads up, you'll be seeing that next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Are there any reports or communications from other commissioners? All right, seeing none, then I think we are ready to move on to petitions. We have no consent agenda this evening, so we're ready to begin. As I mentioned, PUD 17-20, the McDowell Business Center, LLC. That petition has been continued to the November meeting, and we have 3 petitions to consider tonight. The first is ZO-20-20. This is a request for a rezone of 7.22 acres from PUD to mixed-use student housing at 301 East Brownstone Drive. The petitioner is the Standard at Bloomington, LLC. Case manager is Eric Grulich. And Eric, are you ready to present?
Yes, I am ready. Give me just a second to share screen and we'll be ready.
All right. The floor is yours.
So as you mentioned, this is a request for the Standard at Bloomington for a property at 301 East Brownstone Drive and was zoned this way as a planned unit development back in the late 80s. And so the petitioners are requesting to rezone this property from a planned unit development to the recently incorporated mixed-use student housing district in the zoning code. Properties to the north of this are zoned residential high-density multifamily, as well as some single-family to the north. To the west, you have land that is used and zoned for mixed-use medium scale, consists of some apartments and some offices to the west. To the south, you have the railroad tracks, and then further south, some single-family residences, and then just to the east of this is a mix of a Duke substation, some single-family, and some IU-owned property. So the site has been developed with a multifamily residential complex. As I mentioned, this was rezoned back in the mid-80s to allow for this specific use. So the planned unit development is a one-use PUD specifically for this site and this development. So the petitioners would like to redevelop the entire property, remove all of the buildings, the drives, the parking area, and redevelop it with a new student-oriented apartment complex. So the request to rezone this to the mixed-use student housing district is what is before the Plan Commission tonight. There is no site plan approval that is being requested or given at this time. This is simply the rezoning petition itself. So the petitioner will have to come back for that site plan approval. So we're going to hopefully try to just keep the conversation focused on the rezoning aspect as best as we can. So this was heard at the September Plan Commission meeting. We gave a brief overview of the petition and heard lots of comments from the Plan Commission. A lot of those comments reiterated what was in the comprehensive plan of looking for other areas to locate student housing outside of the downtown. This location, this area was identified as a good possible location in the comprehensive plan. And so this is here tonight for the second hearing for this petition. I'll just real briefly go through the site plan stuff, but like I said, I'm not going to dwell on it too much because although it's kind of been flushed out, it's still somewhat conceptual and not really being reviewed. But the petitioners would be proposing to redevelop the site with 3 buildings. There would be 3 drive cuts along 14th Street for parking and access areas. The center building would have a parking garage for most of it. The front would have residential units along there. There is an internal amenity center that is being proposed with the petition. The overall site has a fair amount of elevation change, just about 50 feet of elevation change from the east to the west as it slopes downhill as you go west on 14th Street. So the west side of the site, as you can see here, is a 1-2-story building, kind of slopes up to 4 or 5-story, and then a 6-story on the far east side of the site. This has been so far identified to meet all of the standards of the mixed-use student housing district. So the mixed-use student housing district allows for buildings to go up to 6 stories or 70 feet. So this would still fall 75 feet, I mean. So this would meet all of those requirements. So here is a rendering kind of showing the building in relation to surrounding properties. This is looking south. So you have the Terra Trace apartment complex that is in the foreground here in the front, and then to the south you see kind of the downtown in the background, some of the single family housing and kind of the areas surrounding the site. So the presence of the railroad tracks to the south certainly provides a great transition area between this property and the other properties to the south. As I mentioned, there is a multifamily complex immediately to the north of this, which is predominantly student-oriented. There was another student-oriented apartment complex, Cherry Glen, I believe is the name, just a little bit to the north of this, that received some variances and use variances back in, I think, early 2010, something like that. So the area surrounding this has a mix of uses, but it is predominantly multifamily oriented and certainly student oriented given this location. The IU Stadium and the Park and Ride is located just to the north of this. 14th Street is already a pretty heavily traveled corridor, both for pedestrians and vehicles. So this location is ideal for a more heavy, dense use that would be oriented for students going to and from campus. So this is located on a bus route. 14th Street is on the Bloomington Transit Corridor, goes east to the site and then south along Indiana and then along 13th Street. So it has good access from the Bloomington Transit Service, which is certainly ideal. This project would install new sidewalks along this frontage. There are sidewalks mostly along Dunn Street and then further to the east along 13th Street. The Woodlawn corridor was also just recently improved by IU. So there's good pedestrian access and connectivity from this site to campus, which you can see just to the east of the site here on the right side of the screen. So the comprehensive plan, as I briefly kind of mentioned, and as we discussed last month, gave a lot of guidance to the community and the Plan Commission for the location of student housing within the community, heavily encouraged it to occur outside of the downtown, identified the areas around the bypass and 17th Street, along Walnut and Dunn as being ideal locations. Certainly redevelopment within areas that have already been developed decreases urban sprawl. Adequate goods and services and utility infrastructure makes this an ideal location as well. So with that, we were making a recommendation for a favorable, forwarding this to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation and the one condition that is listed in staff report. And I just wanted to clarify on this one condition that, as a Planning Commission may recollect with some recent projects, there was a lot of conversation regarding contributions and funding to Bloomington Transit to facilitate a shuttle. The petitioners are not proposing a shuttle with this project, so we're not trying to iron out any of those details. And this condition is not implying that they must make a contribution to Bloomington Transit. It's simply stating that they are not allowed to operate a private shuttle. If the direction starts to go that they want that, then we can have a different conversation. But the condition was simply just to bring to everybody's awareness that a private shuttle is not being approved, and that any future transit desires would need to be coordinated with Bloomington Transit. So I just wanted to kind of clarify what that condition was trying to say. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Are there any questions? Excuse me, before we go to questions, is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add to the presentation?
I assume it's Kendall. If that's, I will try, I'll unmute you just a sec.
Hey, Kendall here. We just wanted to add, we gave our full presentation last week. We won't be doing that again. So we're just here to answer any questions, clarify anything. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Kendall. All right, then we'll go to the commission for questions for either staff or for the petitioner. Are there any questions? Surely there's at least one question. This could be a first.
I guess just since you're asking us for questions, nothing's changed, right, from last time when we saw this. Is that correct?
Correct. There have not been any changes to the petition or the petition site or the building design or anything. Same petition, same request.
Okay, so yeah, I don't have any questions. I'll try.
Yeah, just as a reminder, you know, if this were a site plan approval request, we might expect to see a lot of changes from one meeting to the next, as this is just a recommendation on a rezone, and we will see a final site plan approval at some point in the future. We really wouldn't require or even request that the petitioner make a lot of changes to a site plan or design at this point, because that's not what we're approving.
Right. Totally understand. That's why I don't have any questions. I'm guessing that might be why no one else does either, since you were asking why we didn't.
Yeah, I think it's probably just important for the public to have that context, because I think we probably get used to this rhythm of seeing a lot of changes between one meeting and the next. Okay.
So two things quick from me. One is, but the condition is new. The condition wasn't part of our presentation the last time, correct, Eric?
Right, correct. Last time it was just the first of the required second hearing. So, you know, we did not have any proposed findings, no proposed conditions, because that wasn't, you know, what was happening at that hearing. So this is the kind of final second hearing here. So this is why you're just now seeing that condition, because, you know, it just wasn't part of the staff before.
And that sounds like something that we might see on any large mixed-use facility like this, where there's some perhaps interest that any developer might have in adding a shuttle service. So this seems to be aligned with kind of what we're hoping to see in terms of transportation and on sites like this. I don't think that was a question, actually, so it's right. Yeah, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, we will move to public comment. Again, the petition here, the question at hand is a recommendation to the City Council on a rezone of this property, rezone from PUD to mixed-use student housing. We're not considering the specifics of this design tonight, just whether or not we want to recommend this rezone. So
can you give the instructions? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So if you'd like to make public comment, the way to do that is if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button amongst several others probably, but one that says participants. If you click that participants button, you should see a list of participants, and at the bottom of that list, you should see a button that says raise hand. And if you'd like to make comment, just click that raise hand button, and Jackie will see that and do her best to recognize you in the order that your hand was raised. Once you're recognized, you'll have 5 minutes to give comment, and we'll go from there. So go ahead, Jackie.
Mark, you can go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, and one other thing, just when you recognize, please start by stating your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mark Fig with Fig Investment, 913 North Walnut, and other properties in Bloomington. I wanted to speak tonight to the process. As everybody's aware, I've been involved in a lot of the planning issues over the years in Bloomington. I primarily am trying to understand the reason to have a rezone at this juncture when we just completed with painstaking work a housing study that's supposed to go in and make these maps and actually zone areas according to the comprehensive plan. So I'd love for the Plan Commission to think about that. I feel like this is a bit of a spot zone. I'm certainly not against density, as everyone's aware, but I'm just tired of process. You know, we just went through the CDG project at 1800 North Walnut. That was a PUD. So I'm really trying to understand, you know, how to operate in this community given those things. So the map is important. I'm not saying this wouldn't be part of that map, but I don't know that. So obviously there's some inside information there that we're not privy to. I'd also like to just say that in regarding that uncertainty, that I would like to see this be a PUD and actually, go through the process, because I think as a neighbor, I'd like to see the specifics, be dealt with now and not in the context where the density is already granted. So I'd like to have it be a PUD instead. So those are my comments. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Alexander. I live about 3 blocks west of the property. And first of all, I would like to say that I'm in favor of the idea of changing it to the zoning request. But I walk back and forth to work. I work on campus, and I would just like to take the opportunity to say that the sidewalk network for pedestrians there is really not as good as people are making it out to be. Indiana is kind of hard to cross, and there isn't a signalized intersection between 10th Street and 17th Street, which when you're a pedestrian is a very long way to walk. And when you get to either 10th Street or 17th Street, they're very wide intersections. They're not particularly friendly to pedestrians anyway. If you are going to cross on 13th, if you're going to cross Indiana on 13th Street specifically, the visibility there is very bad. You can't see anybody coming because there's parked cars, there's a slope, there's the bridge. And then the sidewalk on 13th Street, the north sidewalk is one of those old WPA sidewalks, and I love them, but that one is, it's so bad that the blocks are missing, cars park on it, it creates puddles. And on the south side of 13th Street, there is nobody. There's no sidewalk at all. The other thing, and that's mostly what I wanted to say about the sidewalks, except for one more thing. It's probably of no surprise to you that I'm Greg Alexander's wife, and he was at the last meeting, and he told me that somebody said that they thought it would be a good idea, that people would love to walk all the way to Woodlawn Street from this property. And I about jumped out of my skin, because you would either have to cross Indiana at 13th or 14th, and then you would have to walk 3 or 4 blocks. And it just doesn't make any sense. As a pedestrian, you want to take the shortest path that has the most diagonals, and walking all the way to Woodlawn Street just isn't it. The other thing I would like to comment on is the bus systems. I think it's great that the One is there. The One is a great bus if you're trying to get from there to campus, but it only runs once an hour. So I tend to use the One as a backup bus, and I see a lot of people, not a lot of students, because I just don't think it runs long enough. But I think that's something that you could, we could talk about. And the other thing is the number 6. The number 6 is the heavily there's lots of students in the number 6. That's the one that I take when I'm taking the bus. But in order to get to the number 6, to get it outgoing, you have to cross College and Walnut. And as I have complained repeatedly, there is no crossing between 10th and 17th. And if you think Indiana is hard to cross, it's like crossing a freeway. It's a disaster. There's like little stripes on the thing, and I appreciate the stripes, but practically speaking, to cross College and Walnut is a disaster. And so if you wanted to take the inbound bus to campus, that's what you have to do to take the number 6, which would be the logical thing for me. So those I think are my major points. Just, you might want to actually go out and try and walk around in that neighborhood. The train bridge is particularly troublesome. They always are. But Indiana is going to be hard. There should be sidewalks all the way up and down Dunn. I don't think it's complete. And I think I've hit on just about everything I meant to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any additional public comment? I'm not seeing any additional hands raised, Jackie.
None here and none on Facebook.
Okay. We'll wait just a few
Oh, wait,
more.
we have a waiver. Hold on. An actual real hand waiver. Hold on just a sec. Let me get down there. Sorry, just a moment. I can find you in the list. There we go. I think you can unmute yourself. There you go. Do it again. Okay.
Hi there. Thanks for allowing us to talk tonight. I'm Susan Elkins Goldsworthy, and I'm a neighbor. I've been in this neighborhood for 25, 30 years. I actually have the office to the west of the proposed rezone property. So I do have some apartments here, and my office building is here. So I definitely have an interest in this area as well. My concern is that this project is so large. It's about 5 times what the density had been. I'm not necessarily against density either. And I know things have changed since we were here, but we only have 28 potential people that live on our property here. I do know that the traffic out here at 14th and College is horrible. So I just think that we would have to address, traffic for sure. And just getting in and out of the property is a concern. I would also probably like to see it done as a PUD as well, instead of having a rezoning, or maybe seeing the plan and the maps before we actually were to rezone, to see if it's actually even feasible at that location. 1,000 people versus a couple hundred people coming in and out of that area is a lot different. But we do see a lot of wrecks that happen right here in front of us. Quite often. In fact, I think there's people out there usually taking traffic counts quite often as well. But it just seems like we're going a little bit backwards if there's maps that are being proposed, that maybe it should be done as a PUD versus a rezone. And I just wouldn't want the neighborhood to also be negatively impacted by those items. And that's all I have. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Last call for public comment. Going once, twice. Okay, and we are then back to the commission for any additional questions or comment or a motion. I see Susan.
Just briefly, because it was brought up by a couple of the members of the public. I believe this was addressed early on when we heard this for the first time, but if Eric or anyone from the staff could address the issue of why this is a rezone as opposed to a PUD with respect to the upcoming mapping that's underway.
Yeah, absolutely. So whether this petition was handled as an amendment to the existing planned unit development or a rezone, it's the same process. So the petitioners chose to file this petition for the rezone because they are, and we are, and everybody is uncertain of how long the city's process is going to take to fully hear this out and vet it. So the reason why they are choosing to request a rezone to the mixed-use student housing rather than amend the PUD are several. One, the standards for a planned unit development are more stringent than they are now. But even more specifically and to the point is what they are wanting to do is exactly a student housing district project. So they, when we had initial conversations about amending the PUD and what standards to use, we certainly recommended you use the mixed use student housing district standards, and they were meeting all those. So there's, this was going to be another single use PUD, which is not what the PUD process is supposed to be for. It is supposed to be to incorporate mixed use projects, which this is not. This is a single use development that is exactly matching the intent of the student housing district, meets all of the standards of the student housing district. So it should be zoned exactly what it is looking to accomplish. So those are the reasons why they are going forward with the mixed use student housing request rather than the PUD amendment. As I mentioned, this area was already identified in the comprehensive plan and is certainly still going to be on the discussion for incorporating within a larger student housing district that may incorporate more land around this. But given the size of this property, spot zoning really only kind of comes into play, if you've got a small piece of property that's very different than everything around it. This is over 7 acres. It's a huge chunk of ground. So it's not really a spot zoning of one property because it's a large piece of property. So that's kind of the reasoning behind what's before the commission today.
Thanks
If
for
I
that
can jump in.
clarification.
Oh, sorry, Susan.
No, go
That's
ahead.
Okay. Just on a broader scale, PUDs aren't the answer to everything. They're supposed to be mixed use. If they can be, this is clearly one use, as Eric stated, and was in the, I think he very well described the reasons in the report for why MS is appropriate at this location, whether or not the city has publicly identified this as a place of discussion for mixed-use student housing. It was pretty clear, I thought. And just for clarification purposes, and he said this, but the plan unit development district ordinance process and a rezone are the same thing. So we're not losing anything by the public process-wise. Mr. Figg said he had concern with the process. We are losing nothing process-wise. This is going through the same process as the district ordinance would, which is coming to you for a recommendation and going to council for a decision. Any conditions can be added. It's a discretionary approval. It's the same process. So just for anyone watching at home, we actually aren't losing anything that way. And with over 100 PUDs in town, the fact that what they wanted to do met so closely with a district we as a community have created and identified and said we want to be able to use, it made the most sense to them to identify that way and go forward that way. And as everyone knows, anyone can file any request they want that they meet a full application. So that's what they chose to do, and we analyzed it and agreed that it made sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions from commissioners? Would someone like to make a motion on ZO-20-20? The recommendation is that we forward this to council with a positive recommendation and one condition for approval, that is that there would be no private shuttles allowed.
I'll make the motion to forward petition ZO-2020, the standard at Bloomington, onto council with the one condition in the rezone request.
Okay, do we have?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any final comment before we call the roll? Okay, please call the roll.
Whistler,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Copper,
Yes.
St. John.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the resolution passes. So we have, sorry, we're on to our next petition, ZO-21-20. This is a request for rezone of a 7-acre property from residential medium lot, R2, to employment. This is a property at 1600 Fountain Drive. The petitioner is Comcast, and the case manager, once again, is Eric Grulick. So Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Brad. This is a request, as you mentioned, from Comcast Communication for a property that they own on West Fountain Drive at 1600. The property is zoned residential medium lot, R2, and has been developed with various outbuildings that serve Comcast Communication and their service technicians. A lot of the use that happens on this site is the storage of trucks and equipment, as well as some communication equipment that they use as well within the community. So the property has a mix of uses that surround it. There's an auto salvage and JV salvage just to the west of this. Just to the south of this site, once again, is a railroad track that kind of divides kind of the uses. To the south of the railroads, you have a lot of residential. To the north of the railroad, you have a lot of industrial uses. To the east of this site, you have some single-family residences, and then to the north, you have some single-family as well as some industrial just to the north, and a church. So the site, as I mentioned, has been developed with several buildings for Comcast Communication. So they would like to tear down one of the existing buildings that is on the north side of the site and construct a new building there. However, given the zoning that is on the property, this is a legal non-conforming use. So this site has received several use variances over the past 10, 15 years to allow for several expansions and additions. However, there is not a use variance process in the code anymore. So the only way to legitimize the use to allow for the expansion is to rezone the property to a district that allows for this. Very similar to the Duncan Campbell petition that we heard just a few months ago. So the petitioners are requesting to rezone this to mixed use, or I'm sorry, to employment, to allow for them to tear down one of the existing buildings and construct a new one. So the site briefly has been developed with several buildings and parking areas. There is a mature tree canopy coverage perimeter that surrounds the site. There is a sinkhole just on the west side of the parking area. So none of those are being impacted with this petition. The location of the new building is in the exact location of an existing building. So they're just kind of they're just kind of redeveloping their existing campus or site. So the blue area is where the existing building is that is being removed, and would be constructed with a new building that is larger. This new building would allow for an existing communication tower to kind of come down, as well as allow for them to store new buildings, or I'm sorry, new equipment and other things within the building itself. So the site has a kind of a split from comprehensive plan designation. The western 2/3 of the site is designated as employment, and the eastern 1/3 is designated as mixed urban residential. So that boundary line kind of more or less falls where the tree canopy coverage area is. So the portion of the site where the building and the parking and the main use is designated as employment. So the employment designation within the comprehensive plan certainly is aimed at kind of industrial uses, certainly uses that encourage employment within the community, not residential. So the use of the property and the continued use of the property provides more of the desires of the comprehensive plan for the employment area, which is kind of what the petitioner is requesting to do, to expand and allow to the use to revitalize the site and allow us for its continuation. So we did analyze this based on the guidance in the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned, the Employment Center District focuses on professional and business offices, kind of light assembly, research and development, a mix of office uses, manufacturing, light manufacturing, a lot of what already occurs on the site. So this would allow for the building to be removed. So the general area of disturbance on the site is not increasing. As I mentioned, there are some sensitive environmental features on the site. There's a sinkhole, as well as the tree canopy area that we would request to be preserved. So as I mentioned with the previous petition, this is the first of the second hearing, so we're not proposing any conditions of approval. We are certainly highlighting that with the subsequent staff report that would come out next month, we would have a condition of approval that would require the sinkhole to be set aside in a karst preservation area, as well as preservation easements for the areas that are currently the tree canopy coverage. So at this time, we are simply recommending that this be forwarded to the required second hearing. But we do want to point out that certainly the comprehensive plan would support the rezoning of this property to an employment use with the protections of the buffering to kind of buffer this from the adjacent single-family uses. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Eric. Is there a representative of the petitioner who'd like to add anything at this time?
So I believe Janice is one representative.
You can raise your hand, but I will find Janice. Here we go.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, you can go ahead.
So I'm going to defer to Comcast, and he's on here as well. ERODRI 224.
Got it. Just a sec.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Good evening. This is Eddie Rodriguez. I'm with the design team from Comcast, and we also have Matt Kelly on the call with Government Affairs. I just wanted to add that basically what we're doing is we're building over the existing head end. So we will only be increasing the footprint by and large 6 feet on each wall. The 6 feet will enable us to get our new foundations in, and that will allow us to expand the building to the criteria required today to meet our customer needs. The building, we have a couple issues with the building. The first issue is it's wood construction. meaning wood walls, a wood roof joist system, and it doesn't meet our standards. Our standards require 2-hour rated walls and ceiling. And then the building height doesn't accommodate our 4-tier ladder rack system to accommodate internet, video on demand, things of that nature. And then obviously the footprint, we just need to expand a little larger to accommodate the needs. And also the sinkhole area, we have no intention of affecting that. And obviously the tree canopy area will remain as is. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we've heard from the case manager and the petitioner. Are there any questions from commissioners for either of them? I see Commissioner Kinsey.
My question is about the protection of the buffer from the adjacent property, single family. And I wonder, Eric, if you could talk a little bit about how that would be maintained, or what the standards for EM would allow or permit within that. How close can they get, and what are the expectations for maintaining that canopy, if that's what it is, or if there would have to be something else?
Sure, absolutely. So an employment use up against single family requires a type 3 buffer yard, which adds an additional 20 feet onto whatever the base setback is, and then requires 1 tree for every 20 linear feet of adjacent property along that border. So the existing area, and let me put the site plan back up so we can see that. So the existing site and tree canopy coverage exceeds that. They've got a substantial distance from that property line to the north. They've got tree canopy coverage in there. There might be a little bit of an area where a couple of trees might need to be planted where my cursor is, but the tree canopy coverage that is there well exceeds that 20 feet. So that provides that buffering, and actually, that specific area where that gets closer is up against another EMU, so they wouldn't actually have to buffer that specific location. They would just need a buffer from the single family to the north and then to the east. And as I mentioned, the amount of tree canopy coverage that is there and the distance well exceeds what is required. So setting that aside already accomplishes that requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions from commissioners? Okay, I'm not seeing any. All right, well then we will move on to public comment. So again, if you are here to make public comment on this petition, ZO-21-20, please raise your hand. The way you do that again is clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen and then clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of the participants list. And if we see any hands raised, Jackie will recognize you, and you can state your name for the record and then give up to 5 minutes of comment. So we'll give a few minutes for any hands to raise. I'm not seeing any yet. Jackie, you see any here or on the Facebook feed?
Nope, none here, none on Facebook. No messages.
Okay. All right, last call for public comment on ZO-21-20. Going once, going twice. All right. We are then back to the commission for any final questions, comments, or for a motion. I see Commissioner Cochran.
So mine's just a comment, and Eric and I have had this conversation before. I will support this request. However, I'm not a fan of this area being an employment center. I think, and I know that's in the comprehensive plan, but since Fountain Drive is now a cul-de-sac and does not have access to 37, there's a lot of land in that area that I think will go underutilized because of the limited uses under employment center. But it's just some things that I've ran into, but just wanted to make that comment. But I will support this this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from commissioners?
I have a comment, and it's a comment I make frequently. Just the fact that this property is going to butt up against some extensions to our trail network. I do have a question now, I guess. This is only being asked for a rezone, but I know it says revised landscape plan prior to receiving building permits. Is that when they could possibly address kind of extending that trail in front of their property, or is that something that the MPO is going to take care of, and that's why we're not focusing on that during this rezoning request? I just want to make sure that we take every opportunity we have to extend that trail network, and I'm a little confused why we're not discussing it in this, unless we're just not to that stage. Because even though that's a greenlit project at the MPO level, doesn't necessarily that's a guarantee. So still piecemealing these trail segments to have a contiguous network is crucial.
No, that's a good question. Tron and I addressed that in the staff report in the third paragraph, where I called out that there is a multi-use path that is required along this frontage, and the petitioner would be responsible to either construct that or make a contribution equal to the cost of what it would be along their frontage. So that's something that we'll address as a condition of approval at the next hearing. So there are no conditions of approval being proposed tonight because this is just the first hearing. So that's something that will be laid out in writing at the next hearing.
Perfect, thank you. And I just, echo to Comcast that they're going to get a lot of traffic in front of that. So if they want to go above and beyond, it could be a pretty cool partnership with the city.
So I guess just to follow up on that, Eric, that you're saying that'll be a condition of approval that you'll recommend at the next hearing. Would that not just be a requirement for any future site plan approval? Wouldn't that just sort of be
yes, it'll be a requirement.
Yeah. Okay.
Dedication of right-of-way as part of a rezone and meeting the transportation plan as well. Right, Eric?
Correct. So they don't need to dedicate right-of-way here because we've got actually more than we need. So this would be handled. So I'm not certain that this would require a major site plan approval. This came in as simply a building permit. So okay. I'm not 100% sure that this would have to come back to the Planning Commission for any kind of a site plan approval, but we would cover this with a condition of approval at the report for next hearing.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Or a motion? Just as a reminder, the recommendation is that we forward this to second hearing in
Yes,
November.
Mr. Chair, I would move that ZO-21-20 be forwarded to the required second hearing.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any final discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Hey, could you clarify who seconded that motion?
I did, Jillian.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see, Kate? Herrera?
Yes.
Cochran?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
St. John?
Yes.
Kinsey?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Hopper?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. We are now up to our final petition for the evening. This is SP 2220. This is a request for site plan approval for a two-story addition to a commercial structure at 2670 East 2nd Street. The petitioner is 616 South College Mall Road, LLC. And the case manager is Keegan Gulick. Keegan, are you with us? And
Yes, just one sec. All right, can you guys see my screen?
we've got you.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Thanks. So this is for the property located off of East 2nd Street at 2670 East 2nd Street near the intersection of College Mall Road and East 2nd there. The petitioner is requesting site plan review for a two-story addition to the existing commercial structure. The property is currently zoned mixed-use corridor, MC, and is developed with a two-story commercial structure. Surrounding properties to the north and east are also zoned MC and include commercial uses, such as commercial, retail, restaurants. The properties to the south and west are zoned residential high density and have been developed with multifamily dwellings, such as the Woodcrest Court condos and Hunter Ridge apartments. Like I said, the petitioner is proposing a two-story addition and renovation to the existing structure. The additional 2 stories are 8,845 square feet each, making the total addition 17,690 square feet that'll be used for commercial space. And that's the reason why that this is going to the Plan Commission today, is that any development that contains more than 15,000 square feet of gross floor area requires major site plan approval. And like I said, this contains 17,690 square feet. On the left are some pictures of the existing structure, and to the right are some renderings of what is being proposed. And here's an overview of their site plan. The site will utilize the existing entrance along East 2nd Street. A new sidewalk and tree plot will be installed along East 2nd Street in accordance with UDO standards. Dimensional standards will be met by removing excess parking within the front parking setback. There is a minimum, or there's not a minimum, parking requirement for this zoning district, and the maximum allowances will depend on the uses, but for office uses, for example, 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet are required. That would give them a maximum parking of 116.75 spaces. This proposed site has about 42 parking spaces shown. Here's just their floor plans for the 3rd and 4th floor additions, which are 8,845 square feet each. For dimensional standards, they will meet the dimensional standards for the mixed-use corridor zoning district. The structure meets the setbacks, and they'll meet the front parking setback by removing the parking that's within that front parking setback 20 feet behind the front building wall. Bicycle parking is required here for commercial uses. It's required at 5% of provided vehicle parking spaces, which, since they only have 42, I believe it's 2 spaces would be required. They're proposing 10 bicycle parking spaces here. A new sidewalk and tree plot is required as well, which they are proposing along East 2nd Street. They're proposing a 7-foot sidewalk and 5-foot tree plot. The transportation plan calls for a 10-foot sidewalk and 5-foot tree plot, but that can be reduced if deemed necessary by the Planning and Transportation Director. Landscaping, they will be adding street trees to this site. Code requires canopy trees every 40 feet that abuts public right-of-way. The proposed plan meets this requirement. And they will be requesting a variance from type 2 buffer yard standards given the location of the existing parking lot. So they will have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals in order to receive approval for that. We have received concerns from adjacent property owners concerning the building height, design, increased traffic, and inadequate parking. This image on the right is just an exhibit I received from the petitioner to try to visualize what the height of the proposed structure will be compared to the adjacent condos to the north. Another thing to note is that this approval is not discretionary, but because it meets that threshold for major site plan approval, it does have to come for the hearing, but it is not a discretionary approval. This is another exhibit that I received from the petitioner, and the petitioner can maybe speak more on this, but this was meant to show what the shadow impact will be with the existing structure versus the proposed structure. On the left is the shadow impact of the existing structure at 6 a.m. on a summer solstice, and on the right is the impact for the proposed structure. And on the bottom left is the existing 7 a.m. for the winter equinox, and the proposed is or on the right is the proposed structure. The comprehensive plan designates this area a regional activity center, and they provide guidance for development in this area, including redevelopment in this district should be encouraged to grow vertically with the possibility of 2- or 3-story buildings to accommodate denser office development, residential, multifamily, structured parking, and improved multimodal connectivity. The goal for redevelopment is to create few high-density retail, office, residential activity nodes, and a mix of uses, predominantly retail with office and residential being secondary. And I'll just go through the elevations here briefly. We have the north elevation, south elevation, east, and the west. So in conclusion, this project does meet the development standards of the mixed-use corridor zoning district with the following exceptions of the side buffer yard standard, which they will need to get a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals for, and this proposal is in line with the goals of the comprehensive plan. So with that, the Planning and Transportation Department recommends that the Plan Commission adopts the proposed findings and approves SP-22-20 with the following conditions: that the approval is contingent upon approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals of a development standards variance from the buffer yard standards. 2, that the petitioner will provide the additional required number of bicycle parking spaces as needed on the site plan prior to the issuance of a grading permit, and that a landscape plan that meets all UDO requirements, including street trees, must be submitted and approved prior to issuance of a grading permit. And I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Keegan. Is there a representative of the petitioner who would like to add anything?
You can raise your hand, or Keegan, do you know who's here to speak for the petitioner?
I believe I saw Matt Ellenwood. I'm not sure.
Okay. Matt, I'm gonna unmute you and then. Matt, you're set to go if you're ready.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this is Matt Ellenwood, architect. I think some of the owner representatives may be online as well, and they can kind of outline their rationale behind the proposal. But essentially, building-wise, you know, the idea is that this fairly, you know, unadorned, kind of blank building, while it doesn't do much for the streetscape, so to speak, right now. It is a solid structure. It's steel and concrete block. and it seems to be capable of withstanding an addition. So we think that with a couple additional floors, some exterior reskinning, but maintaining as much of the existing structure and building as possible, that we could give it new life. And then the owners want to attract potentially medical or office or medical office tenants to this location, envisioning that there'll be a demand with the move of the hospital to the east side of town. I can speak more to the building itself. I believe Kendall with Smith Brehab is also on board or online and can speak to the site plan as well if there are any questions.
Sure, we have another person with a hand up. I can throw it to Matt if you're done. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is Scott Owens. I'm a partner in the 616 LLC. I'm a member. And when I want to apologize, I've got the hiccups, and it's not because I've been drinking. So I just want everyone to know it's a chronic problem I have. So anyway, 2670 East 2nd Street was developed originally as a furniture store by my late friend, Bernie Levine. In its day, it was a pretty great store, and I remember it well. Subsequently, John and Joyce Poling became the owners and did a great job as stewards of the property. When the opportunity arose to purchase the building, my partners and I jumped at the chance because we saw a property that was operating decently, but perhaps could be developed to further meet a greater need in our market that wasn't being met. With the development of the new hospital on the 4546 bypass, we see a need for office space on the east side of the city, probably with a focus on medical, but we don't know what that might be. And with College Mall losing so many tenants and other retail spaces sitting empty, we feel that it's important to adapt to the current economic climate, and we feel like this is a really good direction to take this property. We briefly considered developing more apartments on the site, but felt that the office space need would be preferable from a development standpoint and management, and better for our neighbors. It's our desire to be good neighbors, but also to be allowed to develop the property within the guidelines set down by the city and county governments. This proposed development fits very well into the code as set forth by these entities. We have tried to create an addition to the building that will allow us to reface the entire structure in an updated style that will last well into the future. The users we anticipate would be office hour type tenants and quiet users of the space. Our goal is simple: to create a long-lasting investment that serves the community, the neighborhood, and that we can point to with pride. We believe wholeheartedly that this proposed development does just that. So we hope that you'll find in our favor here.
Okay, thank you. Does that conclude your comments from the petitioner?
Yes, I believe so. Unless my partners are here, I don't know.
All right, we'll give your partners a moment here. If there's anyone else from the petitioner who'd like to add any comments to the presentation, please raise your hand. We will recognize you. If not, we'll come back to the commission. So are there any questions either for staff or for the petitioner from members of the commission?
Got a question for the petitioner. It looks like in order to get the sidewalk and tree plot that was mentioned, that the curb line on 2nd Street is bumping out into the existing street space. I was wondering, is that accurate? Do you have details on that?
Yeah, this is Kendall here. I can address that question. Yes, am currently planning on bumping out the street a little bit. It just seemed to make the most sense with how wide 2nd Street is. I thought that's kind of the direction that you guys would probably go, but since we haven't gotten a grading permit and all that yet, we haven't had time to work out the details. So if we need to revisit that and push it farther west, we can do that. Also, it was mentioned that we need the 10 feet path instead of the 7 feet, so I'll absolutely update that to reflect that requirement as well.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I didn't necessarily have a problem with it. It's just we didn't have any details and can't see the context of it, but it sounds like you're saying that's kind of a detail that we'll work out with a grading permit or a right-of-way permit. Is that accurate?
Correct, yep.
Thanks.
Commissioner St. John.
Thank you. I've just 2 questions. Keegan, can you talk a little bit? I know several of the neighbors had written in letters concerned about the sun and the barrier that a tall building could make for sunshine hitting their property. Can you talk a little bit about that picture you put up, which was and I know you said it was and maybe it's the petitioner's question to answer, but could you just sort of talk about that shadow and what that means, and as a way to sort of enlighten some of us about the concerns from the neighbors?
Sure. So, and maybe Matt or someone from the petitioner may want to speak more to this. At least as far as, staff was concerned, we didn't have anything in our code about, the shadow impact from the height of this building. It's within its height requirements, and other standards. So perhaps maybe the petitioner would want to speak more on the shadow impact.
Is there someone from the petitioner who'd like to comment on that?
Yeah. Can you
Sorry,
hear me?
I'm unmuting Matt. Yeah, there he goes.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, we put this together just to help study the impacts from shadow and view with the addition. And this was based on some discussion that we had at a neighborhood Zoom meeting with the Woodcrest Court neighbors to the west, and I believe they'll want to speak and are here tonight. But I wanted to put this together to show, kind of the extremes of shadows at different times of the year. So the 6 a.m. summer solstice would be, that's effectively when the day is the longest, the shadows are the longest. Now, obviously, the sun rises before 6 a.m., but I thought 6 a.m. was, that's a fairly early start to the day to see, how long that shadow is going to be. So the existing you can see on the upper left corner, and then the proposed would be the upper right. It's a little hard to see how far that shadow goes, but it effectively goes just to the west side of our property. And then that's where that serpentine retaining wall is that's on the adjacent property. So my anticipation is that the shadow would probably hit that wall at the earliest point of the day, and then, that's going to recede from there. And then the other diagram on the bottom is the equinox. So that's going to be your sort of typical, that's your average day length in spring and fall. And again, you can see that the shadow from the proposed reaches just to the west end of our property, just kind of up against the east side of their property. So, and then with the given distances to their buildings, we're at about 150 feet to the closest condo building, and then about 108 feet to that one that's a little further west. And that's obviously the one that's going to be impacted the most in terms of the view east. The further south building should still have a pretty decent view east, south of our building. But again, it kind of is what it is. We'd like to think that by us adding onto our building, which is on the east side of our property, being the furthest from their property, and with the buffer that they have on their property, that it's, fairly, mitigated, but understanding that there would be some impact. So that was kind of the reasoning to do this study.
So thank you, Matt. That's helpful. One question is, so I don't know how you did this. It wasn't just a guess. Obviously, you used measurement and sun angles, and this you think is fairly accurate, or?
Yes, that's a good question. So this is, what I did is I took the GIS data and I used that as a base map in a 3D model. And then I extruded the contours and the grades. You can see in that elevation view, that other view that showed the kind of the second street. That's how I also was able to understand the difference in the height between our building and our property and theirs. You know, it's not, it's based on the GIS, which is relatively within, you know, within reason, it's close. So I just use that as a base and kind of extrapolated from there. So.
Okay, so this is a depiction of sunlight and whether or not it gets to that first and potentially second, the two buildings on the left, but it's not a depiction of their view, right? Because by definition, that first building will have their view blocked going east. But it looks like if this is accurate, that they would get sunshine, you're saying. Okay.
Right, that's right.
Okay. Thanks. And I just have one more question. Sorry, I know people have other comments. I didn't understand the condition with the bikes. I was confused because it said, Keegan, that it needed to have 2 bike spots, but they're providing 10. And then it says it's a condition that they have to increase the number of bike spots. Did I misread that?
No, I believe the intent was just that if more are required, that they will have to provide more. But I mean, because the uses haven't been decided yet as what the final uses will be in the space. So if more are required, they'll have to provide more.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners for staff or for the petitioner? I think I see Commissioner Herrera.
Right. So just wondering, the Environmental Commission highlights the green building practices, and there are some suggestions, and I wonder if you are going to contemplate more green building practices and also taking the recommendation about photovoltaic cells.
Sounds like that's a question for, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so I can answer a little bit to that. You know, obviously by adding on to an existing building, the idea is you're utilizing an existing structure. You know, the really what we consider this is a core and shell expansion and renovation. So there will be a number of things that will have to happen to this building to add these 2 stories. They'll have to add an elevator. We'll have to include new exit stairs that will be fire rated, new utilities, sprinkler system, fire proofing, plumbing lines. So there are a number of things that will have to happen to upgrade this building to current standard and to meet the demand of a 4-story building versus a 2-story building. And then there's the exterior renovations. You know, want to add windows for natural light. We haven't talked, you know, at much length about any other additional sustainable principles or, you know, incentives. I know some commercial properties are able to utilize photovoltaics. It partly depends on who the owner and then the tenant is, and how they take advantage of that. Because usually tenants are, you know, paying the utility bill. So while it may be possible to add photovoltaics, we've not committed to that at this point. Again, it's, you know, this is a core and shell renovation with the anticipation of finding an anchor tenant that would come in, and then we'd have to cater the actual building design to their needs. So, you know, the exterior that will be added will meet all current energy codes, you know, well insulated. Windows would meet current energy standards, but But beyond that, we haven't discussed it.
Okay. Any additional questions? I think I see Commissioner Kinsey has a question.
Yeah, thanks everybody for asking other questions that were originally part of my list too. So thank you. The last one I have is about traffic. And I understand that this property, I don't know the current tenants, but given the fact that there is a similar, building and I'm guessing use on that site currently, can you talk a little bit about the increase in traffic that you might expect? I understand that this is a quiet work time, 9 to 5, I'm presuming, kind of space, but is that equivalent to what is there now? Or would this be a significant change in that traffic pattern that it is current?
I could address that a little bit. I think currently we have 50 parking spaces for the 2 stories of commercial space. And per code, we're now going down to 44 parking spaces just to put in the required islands and the parking setback on the front there. So there's actually going to be less capacity for parking and traffic than there was before. I know, the idea with the parking maximums and things is to encourage more people to walk and bike, and obviously we'd be very much happy about that because there is limited parking available. There has been talk potentially about trying to do shared parking with, some of the commercial properties nearby, just to, if those lots are sitting empty, maybe we can work something out. But since we don't really have the tenants identified yet, we can't be fully cognizant of what the parking needs are going to be. So we're basically just keeping the parking lot the same, and I wouldn't anticipate much difference in what you're seeing now versus what you'd see in the future. I don't know if Matt or anybody wants to speak further on that.
Okay, anyone from the petitioner want to add to that? All right. Any other questions then from commissioners? Okay, I had one question. Keegan, during your presentation, you mentioned that this is not a discretionary approval. For those who might be wondering what that means, could you maybe offer a little bit of additional flavor there?
Sure. And I think, Jackie, if you're still there, I think you'd do a better job of explaining this than me, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I can. No, that's no problem. With the new UDO, the thresholds for what site plans have to come to Plan Commission for approval changed. And one of those was the square footage addition that compels this site plan to use. So basically, it requires that this body be the approving body as opposed to staff. But this plan is meeting all requirements. So we are in kind of a weird, we obviously just approved the UDO earlier this year in April and are still in the process of kind of learning how the different parts of it work together. So it does feel odd to bring you a site plan and say, you have to approve this site plan, but we need to talk about it. But I think the intent of including projects of this size was so that they could be publicly, they would have more of a public face of, hey, this is coming, and then you don't just see this happening and wonder why I wasn't told about this. That's why some of the thresholds were changed so that things could be done a bit more publicly, not so that they could be discretionary approvals by this body. So I think we've seen 1 or 2 possibly already this year, and we will see more unless that changes with the code and map update that will be coming through shortly. But yeah, that is why we're saying it's not discretionary, because they are meeting the code requirements for the district, including height and proposed use and the development standards. So there is not a lot of room for this body to deny it, but it is required that it be seen here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I guess just another way to say that would be that the only authority that we would have on this is if we were to determine that it did not somehow meet the requirements of the code.
Sure. So, right. So in our new code, there are general criteria, requirements that have to be met, and this petition meets those. The one exception is the variance that is required. That is discretionary. And if the Board of Zoning Appeals finds that the request for that variance doesn't meet the requirements of code, then it could be denied, which would effectively deny the petition because we have included that as a condition of approval. So for those neighbors and interested parties who were hoping to speak tonight to maybe sway denial from this body, it's possible, excuse me, that discussion could be had at the Board of Zoning Appeals if a variance is needed, and that is heard there.
So yeah, maybe again, just another way of saying that would be that the only grounds for denial would be if this the variance from buffer yard standards were not approved. So that authority lies with the Board of Zoning Appeals, not with the Planning Commission.
Correct. Yes. So functionally, this project is by right, and coming to you is a process that is required by code, not so that you can weigh in on the efficacy of the project, but so that it can be seen in a more public realm.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Nevertheless, this is an opportunity for public hearing and public comment. Look forward to hearing what the public has to say about this. And I think it's time now to move to public comment. So if you're here to make comment on this petition, please raise your virtual hand by either the preferred method would be clicking that participants tab at the bottom of your screen and then clicking on the raise hand button so that we can see that your hand is raised. We'll do our best to recognize video hands that we see raised, but we get a much clearer picture if your hand is raised in the participants tab. Jackie will recognize you if your hand is raised, do her best to do that in the order that they're raised. Once she recognizes you, please state your name for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to make your comment. So Jackie,
great. Nicole, you can go ahead.
All right, thank you, and good evening to everyone. My name is Nicole Bolden. I am the city clerk, and I am a resident of Woodcrest Condominiums, which is right next door to where this project is proposed. I'd like to start by saying that, and with due respect, Keegan, I disagree with his assessment that this meets the goals of the comprehensive plan. All new developments are supposed to be regarded or evaluated in light of their potential to positively or adversely impact the overall health and well-being of the people who live in the surrounding neighborhood. And that's directly from the comprehensive plan. And yet we're talking about people. Karen asked about whether or not people would still be able to get sunlight in their homes and whether it would impact their view. You can't get sunshine if you have to keep your blinds closed to protect your privacy, which is what will happen to people in 2610 and 2608. Mr. Ellenwood rather cavalierly stated that it is what it is. There are people who live in this neighborhood, and it will not only immediately impact those 2 buildings, it will impact all 5 buildings in the Woodcrest condominium community. There is a private courtyard. People will be able to see into it, which means the residents will no longer be able to use their green space that they purchased anticipating its use. That is not what the comprehensive plan asked for. This is not respecting a neighborhood that has been part of the Bloomington community for many, many decades. And it runs counter to the goal or to the policy that would encourage the development of small-scale commercial developments close to all neighborhoods to serve the daily needs of the residents. This will not serve our daily needs. This will actually run counter to them. Jillian asked a question about the increase in traffic. Anybody who lives in the area knows every morning for about an hour and a half and every afternoon for another hour and a half, traffic is dense in this area because there's a school close by. Adding additional traffic will be problematic. Adding additional traffic without additional parking as well will be even worse because again, those cars will overflow. And this is the one time I'm going to refer to my job as city clerk directly. As I know from handling parking ticket appeals, when people want to park, they will park in many different places and they will park in the neighboring residential area. It will create an additional burden for those who live here. I understand that you're operating on a by right development and this is not the time, but you do need to hear that this is a problematic project. It is problematic for its neighbors, and as more people find out about it, they will object to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Who do we have next, Jackie?
One more. How do you go? Mr. Byler? Is that correct?
Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Nicole. My name is Mitchell Byler. I'm the president of the Woodcrest Court Board of Directors. Please let me point out that all 5 members of the Board of Directors are on this call this evening. This subject is very important to us. As Nicole pointed out, parking is going to be a problem. I realize, as the architect mentioned, there may be no minimum standard. However, to meet the recommended standard for parking, the city would normally recommend 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet, which means that the 4-story building would require twice as much parking as it has now. And there will be, as Nicole mentioned, overflow parking. The default parking spaces will be down the hill at Wendy's or up the hill at Woodcrest Court. And I assure you, Woodcrest Court has neither the resources nor the time to police parking on our private property. We are also, of course, concerned about increased traffic and noise. There's a great deal of traffic on 2nd Street. We are also concerned about the value of our homes. I would like to point out that there are no 4-story buildings in the immediate surrounding area. All of the residential properties close to 2670 are 2 stories in height. And then if I just may add a point, for those of us who are not in city government, this process can be bewildering. I was pleased to see that there are several sections in the Unified Development Ordinance that would seem to protect members of a neighborhood. But Mr. Gulick has warned me that the meeting this evening addresses the site plan only and does not address the purpose sections of the UDO because those cannot be enforced. I'm not sure where the appropriate venue is to address the purpose, but all of us who live at Woodcrest are concerned that contrary to the UDO, it does not seem that the developers are doing anything to mitigate negative visual impacts arising from the scale, bulk, and mass of large buildings. And as Mr. Ellenwood has pointed out, the new building, the 2 new floors will definitely impact Woodcrest Court. Thanks to the commissioners for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Just don't see any other hands at this time.
I see one. I see a couple
great.
here.
Okay, perfect. Renee, I'm unmuting you.
All right, thank you. Yes, this is Renee Desarchek. I'm an owner as well as the secretary treasurer of Woodcrest Court condominiums. And I would just like to, again, emphasize some of the points that Nicole as well as Mitchell have brought up this evening. One of the biggest concerns is the amount or lack of parking and the increased traffic coming in and out of 2nd Street. My concern is with people not being able to find parking, there will be a constant in and out of this parking area going across from the Goodwill parking lot and then as well as Wendy's. My concern with the Goodwill parking lot with overflow parking is the safety of then users of the building crossing 2nd Street. And if you know that location, it is to the west, somewhat of an incline, and it is difficult to see at that point when you cross 2nd Street. It does also concern me with the lack of sunlight again, and looking into a building or the building looking into our residence and having to continue to keep your blinds closed, as well as people safety-wise pulling in and turning around in the Woodcrest Court parking area. We then don't know who's coming in, looking, driving around in our parking area of Woodcrest Court. And there is a safety concern in the amount of traffic and then visibility of our complex. So thank you for your time, and I hope you'll take this under consideration.
Thank you for your comments. I did see a video hand raised. Valerie Houghton, I believe, is.
Go ahead.
Oh, Valerie, we can't hear you. You have to.
Okay, try again.
Looks like you're
Hold on.
muted.
No, I'm
Okay,
I'm unmuted
there you
now.
go. You're
There
good.
we go.
I'm good now. Thanks for listening. And I don't really have anything to add. However, I would like to kind of emphasize or underscore what Nicole and Renee, what all three residents have said so far. I too am an owner in Woodcrest, and my concerns are for the parking, for the traffic, and quite frankly, for the lack of privacy, especially in the courtyard and in buildings 2610 and 2608. I think that the additional stories will greatly reduce our privacy and the privacy that we enjoy in the courtyard. And I too am very, very concerned about the lack of parking available, or that would be available with the addition of the 2 stories, and the impact that it would have on our parking spaces, and quite frankly, the difficulty we may have if we have people that are legitimately parking there, that there will be people that are not. And again, as was stated earlier, we don't have the resources to monitor or police this area. It will just become a headache as far as I can see. I'm very concerned, and quite frankly, am opposed to the addition of the 2 additional stories. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any additional public comments? Again, if you'd like to make comment, the way to do that is click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen and then click on the raise hand button. Jackie, should we check, is there anyone on Facebook making comment?
No.
No?
Nope.
All right, last call then for public comment on this petition. Okay, then we are back to the commission for any additional questions or comments or a motion. As a reminder, the staff recommendation here is for approval. Excuse me, with having a little bit of computer difficulty here. The recommendation is that we adopt the proposed findings and approve SP 2220 with 3 conditions of approval. That it is contingent upon approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals of a development standards variance from buffer yard standards, that the petitioner will provide the additional required number of bicycle parking spaces for the commercial uses on the site plan prior to an issuance of a grading permit, and that the landscape plan meeting all UDO requirements, including required street trees, must be submitted and approved prior to issuance of a grading permit. So with that, are there any other questions, comments, or a motion? I see Commissioner Sandberg.
Yes, thank you. I do have one question. It relates to something I read in the proposal that residential uses are secondary. Can someone explain to me, is this primarily a commercial use building, but yet there may be some residential component to it? Is that what I understand?
I can maybe speak to that. I think that was from the comprehensive plan that in the regional activities center, office and residential are the primary, and then residential is secondary for that district.
So this particular, and I know we're dealing with a site plan here. We're not dealing with any specifics to the plan, but I just had some concerns again about where the recourse may be for reducing the floors. And if, that apparently is not going to be coming before this body tonight, but I'm just, again, wondering in terms of the process where that may go beyond the Board of Zoning Appeals that's going to be dealing with this variance request. Anybody else going to be reviewing the actual uses? And
yeah, so the not the number of floors, they are meeting what we as a community decided was appropriate in the code requirements. They're meeting those requirements here, so you are signing off on that. But yes, they will not be able to institute uses on the site unless they are required by code, and we as staff will be monitoring those.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure, thank you.
Maybe to follow up on that though, Jackie, but some residential use is allowed by code in this zone?
I believe, yes, because I believe this is, what is the district? Is it MC, Keegan?
Yes. So
yes. So you think of MC is along some of our our larger roads. Apartments are an improved use. This particular site is not requesting that at this time. The quote in the report, I believe, is a quote from the comprehensive plan describing what types of things are allowed in this particular type of area.
But yeah, so residential use.
But yes, residential. I do believe, yes, residential is a use that would be allowed on this site, correct?
And so once again, if the plan were to change to include residential use, that would continue to be a by right change, yes, and wouldn't trigger any additional review or public hearing.
Sure. So it may trigger public hearing for discussion if it was over the threshold, one of the thresholds that we included in the new UDO, which I believe is 30 units. Then you would see it again in a similar situation to this one. Because we are no longer regulating dwelling unit equivalents, there would be no question whether or not, as long as they could fit it within the building and the design standards for the district, then they could have it there, but it may be discussed at a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, additional questions? I see Commissioner Kinsey.
Yeah, I wonder if we might address some of the privacy concerns that the Woodcrest residents addressed in their comments. Particularly, I'm interested in seeing if the petitioner has any suggestions about ways to mitigate that, or if there can be some specific mention of what they believe is mitigating some of that. Specifically, I'm wondering about the windows on the west-facing side of the building, and if there are windows there that would provide a view into a courtyard. And then another is, I believe in one of the, it might have been one of the Equinix pictures or something, there was a mention of it being about 150 feet from maybe the first building that's closest to 2nd Street. And I wonder if that's I mean, that seems to be a pretty good distance, but I'd like to understand if there's a way to kind of judge or determine if the privacy could be expanded to, or at least to allow a little more, afford people a little more privacy. And then I have a second question, but I wonder if someone could speak to that first.
Matt, is that something you can address?
Matt, this is Matt Ellenwood again. I don't know if we can pull up the site plan view with the dimensions to the adjacent property. Yeah. Yeah. We can start with this one. Thanks. So this again is demonstrating the distance between. This is actually the distance to the closest condominium building at Woodcrest. The smaller building there in the middle is their garage building, I believe. And then you're not seeing the serpentine wall that sits at the property line. But so
yes,
yeah. So the 150 feet and this is approximate just based on using GIS and scaling it. But so you can see that's the distance to the closest building. Now that building actually sits a bit, pretty much just southeast or southwest of our building on this property, or on 2670. The other condominium building, which is more directly west, sits approximately another 30 feet further. You can see that in the next slide with the aerial views when I did the sun study. So that's the northernmost condo building is an additional 30 feet or so away. So that's just to give you a sense of the distance. In terms of the windows on I guess it'd be the west side of the proposed building, there are windows there obviously to bring natural light into the building. They would not most likely be operable windows. They would be closed as an office use. They may have blinds behind them. I think the other point that Scott made was, if this is in an office building, it's going to be a kind of 9 to 5 use. So more than likely, there wouldn't be much evening activity. So hopefully, in the evening hours when residents are at home most, next door, there wouldn't be as much privacy concern, but I don't, so that's about all I can say to that, I guess.
Thanks. My second question is about the wall, and I wonder if someone can report if that wall around it was, I think, referenced as a serpentine wall, if that's continuous along 2nd Street, and if that would be a potential deterrent for someone parking in the Woodcrest Court condominiums, if they don't even have easy access to the property, if there's a continuous wall. I mean, I sort of see it in some images, but I'm not sure that it's...
Sure, I can weigh in on that. This is Jackie Scanlon. Yes, it goes along the entirety of the front of 2nd Street, I believe. Keegan, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. It's quite tall as well, much taller than would be allowed by code now. Yeah, it definitely creates a feeling of that living area being separated from the properties around. And I was, to your last question, I wanted to say, you know, where this building is located now is so much farther from where a building could be built on this lot if this property were to be redeveloped in its entirety. You know, a building could be, I think, 22 feet from the property line with these same dimensions, 4 stories, not to exceed 50 feet by right. And if they, you know, depending on, it would be very unlikely that a building would be that tall and not meet our square footage requirements, but, you know, it'd be possible that you may not even see a development, that development. So the development standards that were vetted and approved through the UDO update that was completed in April do allow the intensity of this building, but to be much closer to an adjacent multifamily or attached single family development as is present on the site of this property as well. So to address your question about how close they are and what they could be.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is I guess this is a comment now that, I mean, I do believe that there are privacy concerns that ought to be respected among people living in the neighboring units and the neighboring residential area. And I presume people in the building would also not want to be privy to some of that as well. So would just say to the developers to keep that in mind and to be thinking about how some of that privacy could be afforded along that, particularly the west facing. So I understand the need for light in a office space too, but to think about how that could be done in a way that still affords people some privacy in the neighboring property. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from commissioners or a motion? We have to have one.
I actually have one more question.
Okay.
So Jackie, when you're talking about by right and what can be done here, I just want to make sure I understand. So with the Board of Zoning Appeals, it's the variance on the buffer yard. I think that's the right word, set of words to use together. If they don't need a variance from the buffer yard standards, they're just good to go. I mean, maybe that's simple language, but is that true? Because that's the only thing going to the BZA. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. Right.
Okay, so after this meeting, if they were to change that and they didn't need a variance for the buffer yard standards, they wouldn't need to do anything else.
They would just have to file for permits, correct?
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
And I think to add some additional context, right, under the old UDO, this would, we might not even be hearing this. It would just be a staff level approval and there would be no public hearing at all. So I think this is a little bit, although I know it's not going to satisfy anyone entirely, it's evidence that we're at least under the new UDO having some additional transparency and additional opportunity for public input, which I think is good. Are there any other questions, or is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion?
I can make the
Commissioner
motion.
Sandberg.
Yes, that the Plan Commission adopt the proposed findings and approve SP-22-20 with the following conditions. 1, the approval is contingent upon approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals of a development standards variance from buffer yard standards. 2, the petitioner will provide the additional required number of bicycle parking spaces for the commercial uses on the site plan prior to the issuance of a grading permit. And 3, a landscape plan that meets all UDO requirements, including required street trees, must be submitted and approved prior to issuance of a grading permit.
And I'll
Could I ask for, oh, sorry. Thank you, Chris. Could I ask for one clarification? Mike, could we ask for the number 1 to be amended to say, if necessary, to Karin's point, that if they are able to address the variance issue, that it wouldn't have to come back, that they could still be approved?
Yes, this is Mike Rooker, city attorney. Yeah, that would be fine if Commission Member Sandberg wanted to modify her motion to slightly change that first condition. Of course, that would be permissible.
Okay. And no pressure, Susan. I just was thinking if they are able to address that, then we would maybe have to bring them back here for a process of saying, okay, they actually don't need this variance, but it's a condition of approval, so we need you to okay that. But if we say, if necessary, then if they don't need it, then it would be okay.
And if you wouldn't mind just saying that again for the record.
Perfect.
And making.
Okay, so the staff proposal is to amend condition number 1 to read, the approval is contingent upon approval by the Board of Zoning Appeals of the development standards variance from buffer yard standards if applicable.
And I would accept that as an amendment to my motion.
And I will second the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any final discussion before we call the roll? All right, seeing none, will staff please call the roll?
Kate, oh, I'm sorry, she's left. Cochran,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Copper,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion is approved. And that is our final agenda item for the evening. Thanks to all of you who have joined, and thanks to members of the public who came to give comment. And again, welcome to Scott Robinson, our new director. Our next meeting is, I believe, November 9th, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Hold on just a second. Yes, that's correct.
Yes. November 9th is our next meeting, and look forward to seeing you all there. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.